Eternal Halloween, The Harvest, written by Anthony Zakari, read by Drew Grimm. Hollow Hill had been waiting for this night all year, from the first golden leaves of autumn to the chill of October winds. Every detail of the town whispered a single truth. Halloween was not just a holiday. It was a rite, older than memory, older than the hills themselves, eternal. The townsfolk gathered in the square, their costumes vivid and detailed, masks of carved pumpkins, painted skulls, and laughing monsters. Children darted between the stalls, candy spilling from small paper bags, their laughter cutting through the smoky glow of the bonfires. But beneath the music, the dancing, and the firelight, there was a tension, a rigid order that newcomers never noticed. Rules were everywhere, unspoken but enforced with pure instinct. Never break the circle of the bonfire. Never remove your mask once the first hour of the festival had passed. Never dare to leave Hollow Hill until the bell struck midnight. Young Thomas Grady, 12 years old and brimming with bravado, had heard the warnings from his grandmother, old whispers about the Hollow Hill harvest. But warnings were for children, or fools. Tonight, he was brave. Tonight, he would win the festival. He ran through the crowd, slipping past families and dancers, darting toward the old hill at the far edge of town. The hill was ringed by iron fences and fog, the skeletal shapes of bare trees bending in the wind like crooked fingers. Lanterns hung from the branches, flickering, shadows dancing across the ground. Thomas didn't see the eyes in the fog. He didn't hear the soft whispers curling around the trees, curling around him. Thomas. Thomas. He stopped, heart racing. The fog thickened, curling at his feet, and a faint shape emerged. A figure, child-sized, pale and silent, standing just beyond the fence. Its mask was featureless, smooth as porcelain, reflecting nothing at all. Come closer, a voice whispered from nowhere and everywhere. It's time. Thomas shook his head and laughed nervously. Who's there? The figure raised its hand. The fog swirled into a spiral, wrapping around Thomas's ankles, tugging, pulling him closer to the hill. He stumbled, falling forward, catching himself on the fence. His lantern swung wildly, casting fractured light across the ground. And then the music faltered. The festival square, once alive with laughter and firelight, seemed distant. A chill spread through Thomas's bones. From the hill, he heard it, a sound of digging, scraping, soil shifting beneath stone, beneath roots, beneath the dead. Thomas froze, and from the fog, hundreds of pale hands clawed up from the ground. At first, he thought it was a trick of the lantern light, but they were real. They moved with intent, reaching for the hill, forming shapes, arms, faces, bodies emerging from the soil, as if the earth itself was giving birth to a harvest. He tried to scream, but the fog swallowed his voice. The figure, featureless mask and all, stood behind him, raising its head, the air vibrating with a low, rasping hum. The whispers began again, louder this time, a chorus threading through Thomas's skull. The harvest, the harvest, the harvest. The festival lights flickered in the distance. People danced, laughed, and shouted, completely oblivious. It was as if Hollow Hill itself had separated the square from the hill, drawing a line between the living and the cursed ground. Thomas turned to run, but his feet sank into the soft, wet soil. The hands tugged, twisted, anchored him. He struggled, kicking, flailing. The fog thickened, forming faces of children long gone, faces with eyes black as pits, mouths stretching wide in silent screams. Do not break the circle, the whispers hissed. Do not remove the mask. Thomas's lantern swung free, landing in the mud. The light caught the hilltop, revealing the true horror. The entity beneath Hollow Hill. Its form was impossible, writhing and fluid, neither fully human nor animal. A mass of shadow, bone, and flickering candlelight. Eyes opened and closed across its body, mouths whispering, teeth gnashing, shapes forming and reforming with every heartbeat. It had waited for the night, waited for the foolish, the reckless, the defiant. The figure beside Thomas stepped forward. Its mask now reflected a twisted version of his own face, grinning with a knowledge Thomas did not have. And in that moment, he understood the truth of Hollow Hill. The festival was not for fun. It was not for celebration. It was a feeding, a ritual older than the town itself. Every mask, every bonfire, every laugh was part of the entity's harvest, and every year it took its due. Thomas screamed, and the figure raised its hand, pointing to the hill. The fog parted, revealing paths lined with skeletal trees, graves older than memory, and soil that breathed. The hands rose from the earth, forming a river of pale flesh, waiting to pull the defiant into the ancient harvest. He looked back. The festival was still alive, but the laughter sounded hollow, as if the air itself had been drained of warmth. Lanterns flickered unnaturally, casting shadows that moved independent of their owners. Some of the dancers paused mid-step, eyes blank, mass twisting ever so slightly as if alive. Thomas knew, deep in his bones, that the night was no longer his own. Hollow Hill had claimed him. The whispers grew louder, now a chant, echoing in the air, in his head, in the soil. He screamed again, and the figure, smooth and featureless, leaned in closer, whispering directly into his mind. You are part of the harvest now, and every Halloween, you will return. You will return to the hill. You will return to the mass. You will return to the entity forever. The fog swallowed him. The hill exhaled, and the harvest had begun. The fog thickened, rolling in like a living tide over the hill, curling around Thomas's flailing limbs as the earth tugged him down. He felt the soil breathe beneath him, pulsing with a rhythm not his own, a heartbeat older than Hollow Hill itself. The figure beside him, the one with the smooth porcelain mask that reflected his face, leaned in closer. Its voice was a whisper, but it struck him in the chest like a hammer. "The harvest has begun." And it had. From the hilltop, the entity rose, its shape impossible to describe. It was a mass of shadow and bone, writhing like a black river, eyes blinking at impossible angles, mouths opening and closing in 1,000 silent screams. Lanterns swung in the distance, yet their light seemed to be drawn into the creature, sucked into the darkness like moths into a flame. The bonfires on the festival square flared, throwing grotesque shapes across the fog, features stretching and contorting until they were unrecognizable, laughing and screaming at once. The festival goers did not notice, or if they did, they ignored it, caught in the rhythm of mask, music, and ritual. Every laugh, every cheer, every candy-filled hand fed the entity, the pulse of its hunger echoing through the hill. Thomas struggled, the hands of the hill gripping him tight, dragging him toward the center of the ancient earth. He looked down and saw the soil parting, forming grotesque faces, some twisted in agony, others frozen in joy, mouths opening and closing as if trying to speak but unable. The whispers, now a chorus of thousands, flooded his mind. "Do not flee. Do not break the circle. Do not remove the mask." Thomas tried to scream, but his voice joined the countless others, swallowed by the fog. And then the mask began to move. From the hilltop, the mask of the festival goers began to shift, stretching and twisting. A child's pumpkin mask split open along the seams, revealing a face that was not his own. It was a composite of every missing child from Hollow Hill over the centuries. Eyes blinked where there should have been a mouth. Smiles carved themselves into the cheeks, grinning wide with teeth glinting in the firelight. The hands from the earth multiplied, pulling at his legs, climbing up his arms, burrowing into his hair, his ears, his clothing. Pale fingers tickled his spine, caressed his cheek. The whispers became words. "Your essence, your life, it is the offering. The harvest demands it." And then the entity descended. It poured down the hill, a wave of shadow and teeth, of eyes and whispers. Thomas could feel the heat of the bonfires, yet the air grew colder, thick with the stench of soil, decay, and burning leaves. The ground trembled under his feet, and the fog writhed as if alive, pulling him closer to the hill's heart. He saw them, children, adults, faces he recognized from missing person posters, from whispers from the town's dark corners. They emerged from the fog, their eyes hollow, masks fused to their faces, bodies jerking in unnatural rhythms. The harvest had claimed them. They raised their hands toward him, beckoning, urging him forward. Resistance was futile. "Thomas," the whispering figure said again, voice deeper now, layered with thousands of others. You are next. You are part of the cycle. The bonfire at the center of the hill roared higher, flames twisting into the shapes of skulls and claws. Shadows flung themselves at Thomas, trying to pull him into the flames. Every step he took backward brought him closer to the hill's heart, closer to the soil that pulsed with hunger. Thomas's mind raced. He realized the rules his grandmother had whispered. Don't leave the festival square. Don't remove the mask. Don't defy the ritual. They were life and death instructions. Every misstep, every rebellion, only fueled the harvest's hunger. The hill shivered, and from the soil, the entity formed tendrils, long black limbs tipped with mass of past victims. They lashed toward Thomas, pulling him to the earth. His legs sank into the soil up to his knees. His arms dragged down as well. He could feel it pulling, sucking the warmth from his body. The whispers intensified. The entity's voice rose, a chorus of hundreds, merging with the whispers. You belong to the hill. You belong to the harvest. You belong to us. Thomas's heart raced, his lungs burned, and then he understood. The harvest just wasn't taking bodies. It was taking essence, life, and identity. Every person claimed became part of Hollow Hill, part of the entity itself, and this cycle would repeat every Halloween. Even if he survived the night physically, he was now bound to Hollow Hill, a part of the ritual. The mask would never leave him. The entity would never release him, and every year, every Halloween, he would return, another whispering, twisted face among the crowd, feeding the next harvest. The hill exhaled, the fog swirled, and somewhere in the distance, laughter echoed. The festival continued, oblivious to the terror at its heart, feeding, dancing, celebrating, unaware that the true horror walked among them, waiting for the next victim. And Thomas, pale and trembling, understood with bone-deep certainty there was no escape. Hollow Hill was eternal. The harvest was eternal. And he was now part of it. Thomas was dragged closer to the entity, the mask on his face fusing permanently, reshaping his features. He struggled against the soil, against the tendrils, but the hill would not release him. He tried to scream, but his voice was drowned in a chorus of whispers, moans, and maniacal laughter. The harvest, the harvest, the harvest. The featureless figure that had haunted him since the fog appeared now rose beside him, taller than before. It placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder, cold, unyielding, unbreakable. You are part of it, the figure whispered. Its voice was layered with hundreds of others. Every gravedigger's child, every foolish soul who had defied Hollow Hill. You are now in the cycle. You cannot leave. You cannot escape. You are the harvest. Thomas's mask split along the seams. Beneath it, his own face, pale and distorted with fear, began to melt into the entity. Tendrils of shadow snaked into his mouth, into his eyes, binding him to the hill. He tried to scream, but the words came out distorted, as though spoken by 100 voices at once. From the fog, another figure appeared, no bigger than him, its mask smooth and white. It raised its hands, showing him that they were already fused with the entity. Its eyes black pits that reflected nothing but endless night. "Join us," it whispered. "I'll be lost forever." Thomas's legs sank deeper. The soil pulled him like a vice, and the entity's tendrils wrapped around his arms, his chest, weaving into his bones. Panic clawed at him. I won't. I can't." But the hill responded with the weight of centuries, the voices of the lost, the laughter of those consumed, and the fog itself seemed to curl around his throat. And then the entity opened its mouth. Not one mouth, thousands, faces twisted, lips stretching wide across the surface of the hill, teeth gnashing. The sound that poured out was the grinding of bones, the ripping of flesh, the shrill laughter of children, adults, animals, every scream from Hollow Hill ever collected. It crashed over him, flattening thought, bending reality. Thomas understood. The harvest wasn't just taking life. It was rewriting it, folding it into itself, making him a part of the eternal ritual. A hand, pale and skeletal, shot from the soil beneath him, gripping his arm, and he felt something pull. Memories, fragments of his soul slipping into the entity. Faces appeared in his mind, screaming, smiling, pleading, and then the figure with the featureless mask spoke one final time. "Welcome to eternity. You are the keeper now. You are the harvest." The soil yawned open, swallowing him to the waist. He kicked, clawed, screamed, then sank to his chest, his neck, until only his eyes, wide and terrified, were visible from above the ground. Tendrils of black smoke collided around him, fusing his body to the hill itself, connecting him to every soul claimed before him. His screams echoed through the fog, but no one would hear. The festival continued. In the square, the music swelled. Lanterns floated, casting warped light on the masks that moved like living things. Children darted through the stalls, laughter echoing unaware, oblivious, and yet some faces, some masks, twitched for a fraction of a second, showing glimpses of the consumed. Thomas, countless others, trapped forever in the ritual. The bonfire flared higher, revealing the entity fully, its impossible shape towering above the hill. Its tendrils reached into the fog, into the streets, into the minds of those foolish enough to watch from outside the square. Every year, it would claim its due, reshaping the town, remaking its festival, feeding, consuming, and every year the story would be whispered, the warnings half remembered. The children would dare closer. And Thomas, now a part of the hill, part of the ritual, part of the entity itself, felt the truth, bone deep. He had been consumed. He would return every Halloween he would rise from the soil. Every Halloween, he would be the face behind a mask. Every Halloween, he would guide the next foolish souls into the harvest. The fog thickened. The entity roared, a sound that was every scream ever heard in Hollow Hill. Yet it was laughter, too. The bonfires crackled, the lanterns flickered, and the hill itself seemed to pulse with a heartbeat, synchronized to the terror below. And somewhere, in the distance, a voice whispered to the town, faint but unmistakable, "Do not leave. Do not resist. Do not defy the harvest, or next year it will claim you too." The wind carried it through the streets, through the trees, through every home, reaching every child who dared play, every adult who laughed, every soul alive and unsuspecting. Hollow Hill had been patient for centuries, and it would continue to be patient for centuries more. The fog rolled back toward the hilltop. The entity sank partially into the soil. The bonfires dimmed. The music became cheerful once more, and the town returned to the illusion of normalcy. But Thomas's eyes, now fused into the masks of those dancing, glimmered in the shadows, a warning and a promise. Every Halloween it would happen again. Every Halloween, the harvest would claim the reckless, the curious, the defiant. Every Halloween, the town would celebrate, and the entity would feed. And the story, the terrifying, ancient, eternal, evil story, would be whispered every Halloween from one generation to the next. Hollow Hill, the harvest, the entity, and the lost children who would never truly leave.